And start now. So, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Kamana Talks. I'm your host, Kamana Kafle, a digital agriculture researcher and project manager passionate about bridging technology, agriculture, and the real world impact. Through this podcast, I bring conversation with agriculture leaders who are shaping the future of modern agriculture. Today, I'm really very excited to welcome Dr. Terry Griffin from Kansas State University joining us virtually. Dr. Griffin is a respected professor as well as a leader in digital agriculture space, contributing to innovation across the agriculture value chain. We are grateful to have him share his insights that will support our ongoing study on digital agriculture adoption in United States. Thank you so much for being here. Let's not waste the time. Let's dive straight into the discussion. So, how would you like to introduce yourself?
Um, my name's Terry Griffin. Please call me Terry, and I am a professor and extension economist at Kansas State University. Sometimes I use the title precision agricultural economist. But in the last 2 years, I have a sort of a new community who I've interacted with, and they tell me I'm a space weather economist. And so we'll talk more about that here in a little bit too.
Okay, as everyone has got different definition of digital agriculture, so
Mhm.
what's your you have already worked too much time on the digital agriculture. So how the person from the someone who
So
worked so long time. Okay, you
yeah,
understand the
so
question.
precision agriculture, precision farming, digital agriculture is all kind of evolved over time. But in general, it means information technology applied to agriculture. And it could be about collecting data. It could be more passive. It could be automated guidance of farm equipment. There's a lot of data and technology goes into it, but we don't really see the numbers and the data popping up as we're using that technology. So, the short answer is information technology applied to agriculture. There's longer definitions, but I'm happy with a short one.
I'm pretty sure that as far as your experience have see lots of changes in the field of
Hmm.
agriculture.
Yes.
So from your perspective, what are the things that are changing nowadays from the conventional agriculture and where
Mhm.
can you see agriculture is going towards?
So I've been studying precision agriculture since the 1990s. My master's thesis was published in 1999, and it was asking, how do Arkansas farmers adopt precision agriculture? And this was when I was at University of Arkansas as a graduate student, and I was also looking at variable rate applications of fertility in rice and soybean rotations. And since then, I've kept an eye on adoption trends. I've partnered with USDA Economic Research Service with Jonathan McFadden and Eric Nujuki, who 3 years ago this month, we released the most recent USDA statistics on the adoption of precision agriculture, digital agriculture. Um, the thing that sticks in my mind is looking at automated guidance. So it was commercialized in the late 1990s. By the year 2000, we were still way under 5% planted acres were using automated guidance, and that's trended upward. As about 3 years ago, we're roughly two-thirds, maybe 70% of planted acres in the United States use automated guidance for corn, cotton, rice, soybeans, wheat, grain sorghum across the board for the major row crops. Now, that is sort of the yardstick that we're using. And you asked me what I seen that had changed. Well, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, 30, we're using that technology to improve our ability to do things. Prevent wide and narrow middles, and one of the things today in the last 2 years has been fascinating is it's obvious we've become reliant upon that technology. Not all acres, 30% of the acres don't use it, but those acres that do use it for automated guidance and automated section control have become reliant. And if you remove that technology, then farmers are at a disadvantage. And we saw that across the Midwest and down the eastern seaboard as far south as Georgia on May 10th and 11th of 2024, when we had GPS outages caused by the Gannon storm, a solar storm that had caused a geomagnetic disturbance. And it proved to us that we became so reliant upon this technology that's worked for us so well for so long that we didn't have a plan B when it wasn't working on really wide equipment that had technology that wasn't immediately able to revert back to something simpler.
So, could you briefly describe your role and experience in implementing or managing digital agriculture initiative across the agriculture value chain?
Sure. I've been involved in development at the university as well as the private sector of tools, digital decision making tools. I spend a day of the week. I got a 20% applied research appointment at Kansas State University, and plus my extension and outreach. I'm 80% extension, and I spend a lot of time disseminating these things that I'm learning about. So I focus on the intersection of agriculture economics and emerging technologies. I don't know if you noticed my email address that you use. I use the moniker Space Plowboy. So if you go to spaceplowboy.com or any of the socials, LinkedIn, Twitter, X, that's me. And so I try to bring the two together, agriculture as well as not only space, but this word space has double meaning. My PhD is in spatial economics, so I look at how things change over landscapes. So precision ag data changes over landscapes, but also space has a double meaning. I mentioned space weather. That's my oldest hobby. I've been doing it for almost 50 years. Astronomy type things. So I look at the intersection of ag economics and emerging technologies, evaluating the economic efficiency and the risk return trade-offs of digital tools, because they're not completely without risk. And we know the cost of buying technology. We have a harder time knowing. It's more difficult to estimate the benefit side of that equation. And when we think about the decision-making process, it's benefits versus cost. We know the cost, part of the benefits. So there is an inherent risk in looking at all these things. I build tools for farm data communities. So lots of farmers come together, or data is collected from farmers by a third-party aggregator. I build decision-making tools that use data from thousands of farmers, where each farmer becomes their own variable in that system. I'm spending time working on autonomous cotton harvesting projects. So instead of a $1 million machine that does one thing in one crop, there's a lot of interest by the industry, whether it's manufacturers or at the table, researchers. Can we have robots that harvest cotton and do it at a lower per acre cost? So that's a project that I've been working on quite a bit. I do some work in peanuts, and I've got a paper that's in review right now. Hopefully it'll be published in a few weeks. And the question there is, peanuts are a fascinating crop. There's some that's grown around Jonesboro. Arkansas is a peanut state now. Looking at data from Georgia and North Carolina, peanuts rely upon not only GPS but RTK sub-inch accuracy GPS for planting and digging, because I don't know if all of our listeners know that peanuts grow underground. That's something like, as an educator, I want to visualize. It doesn't come from a tree; they grow underground. And so we got to dig these things up, and this above ground mass is vital. And knowing where they were planted and being able to come back with sub-inch accuracy to dig them up, there's a 10, 12, 15% yield penalty in production if we don't do that correctly. So RTK GPS is really important. So the study asked a question: if and when, we've seen the outage, when there's a GPS outage during planting or digging operations, should we wait for GPS to come back, or should we continue and take the penalty? So if we wait for GPS to come back, there's a biological yield penalty for being late, and there's
Yes.
a physical production penalty if we continue without GPS. And the moral to that story is, for the state of Georgia, where most peanuts come from, it's the information that farmers receive as valued information. How much would they be willing to pay collectively for information about when that outage would be over? And the answer is $20 million per event. So all the farmers in the state of Georgia, if they were sitting there trying to plant or dig, GPS, RTK, not GPS may be working, but RTK accuracy, could be diminished. They'd be willing to pay $20 million for information about when the outage would be over, so that they can make a benefit versus cost decision.
You have shared so much like experience that I feel like I can do whole series of podcasts with you.
I'd love to. Yeah, this is the world I live in. So if I
Whenever
go too long, just tell me. Be quiet, Terry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. It's very good to listen from you because I haven't done podcasts for so long time. So it's very good to listen like back from all the speakers. So from your perspective, what factors limit digital agriculture solution from delivering measurable value across the value chain?
So one of the things that we look at is I call it human capital, human effort. Okay, so the ability of the human to deal with things. So, I'm a data person. I love working with data. And, back in the day, it was spreadsheets and Excel. And today, we're using Python and R to handle our data analytics. I love that stuff. But I'm a oddball. Most people don't. So, in particular, if someone opts to be a farmer, they enjoy farming type things. A few of them enjoy the data side of it, but for the most part, my experience is most of them don't. And so, are they willing to contribute the effort to gain the human capital in order to be a data scientist? And so that's the question I see a lot. And I ask that question, are you willing to put forth this effort? I mean, having human capital is a great thing. It's one of my greatest assets, but I had to go through a lot of effort in order to build that skill set. You're in grad school right now. You're devoting a lot of effort into your own investment to become have a degree, learning things. It's not costless though, right? You got to put a lot, not just money, but you got to put a lot of effort into it. So
Yes.
same thing, same thing.
Lots
And
of
a lot of people, yeah.
stress.
And you could do other things too. You could get a full time job somewhere, and that's the same idea on the farm. Is do you put the effort into being a common data scientist, or are you better off marketing grain or learning different skills to apply to the farm? Okay, because from a data science perspective, I can apply my skills to millions of acres at the same time, and so I have a comparative advantage for that. Um,
I did my undergraduate in agri-economics, so I can really relate how it
yeah.
like goes like because data, agriculture economics, and then precision ag, digital ag, all about data
Mhm.
and like managing all the data sets. So I would love to like if you want to share the video that is like autonomous cotton harvest you're working on. So if you have any videos or anything, I would love to look over that. So yeah, let's go to the next question. What complexities do organization, because you are from the university, maybe you will not face the complexity, but you might be facing, typically face when integrating digital agriculture technology into existing agriculture operations when you are dealing with farmer. So can you tell us the experience?
So this is something we see over and over for the last hundreds of years, and that's the shift in skill set required to do things. So we talk about precision dairies. We're just backing up to dairies that went to automated milkers, we still needed labor, uh, but the labor, instead of milking cows, they became more of technicians of the automated milkers. Okay, same thing here. You know, we see shifts in the skill sets needed. Automated guidance. You know, when it came out 20, 25 years ago, one of the things that a lot of people had to do was don't touch the steering wheel, and that was a hard thing to do for a certain generation. To not feel like they needed to be in control of the machine, and having trust was a big deal. Trusting that machine to drive itself, and over time, that allowed a shift in skill sets. And today, oddly enough, it's a technology that I play this little game when I'm in rooms with groups. Like, how much would I need to be willing to pay you, or how much would I have to pay you for you to be willing to remove automated guidance from all of your machines? And it's usually like, there's no amount of money that would entice that decision. But 25 years ago, it was completely opposite. It was like, how insulting is it for someone to suggest that the tractor will drive itself? I can do that. But over time, that perception really changed.
Okay. Any other complexities do you see when you are integrating the digital agriculture technology like precision agriculture, or when you said you are doing the autonomous cotton harvest? So what are the challenges do you think?
One, one of the biggest challenges I see is an artificial challenge, and it's like some of the service providers, especially for variable rate technology, will try to convince their customers that, hey, this system is so complex that no one can do this except for me and my company. I am the only one that has the divine knowledge on how to make variable rate work. And in doing so, they put the mental image that, hey, this is super complicated, and it's not simple. But I think they've done a disservice to the adoption of technology. They've done a disservice to their customers by having that attitude about trying to attempting to make the complexity bigger than it really is.
Okay. And what are the infrastructure capability related constraint do you see as a major barrier for effective implementation? Because I know there will be lots of challenges when you are planning to implement in the field. So what are the challenges or constraint do you see?
So, so in the last 2 years, year and a half, when we noticed that GPS is not as reliable as we pretended it to be, and it's not just space weather, it's jamming and spoofing are artificial human intended problems. Space weather is a natural thing, and it wasn't just that one day in May. It's happened a couple times since then, and I think that's going to be an issue going forward. And what happened is I've teamed up with a few people. There's a space weather scientist. Her name is Tamitha Scove, and I and one of her former students who works at a civil engineering firm. Her name is Janelle Shank. We built this GPS outage report system, and the idea is we're going to crowdsource citizen scientists. Whether they're a farmer, a geocacher, aurora chaser, emergency services. Or just a person using Google Maps to figure out how to get to Walmart. If they have a GPS outage, they can report it, and it goes into this dashboard. And the dashboard will be available for all to see. It has open access, so you can download anonymized data. And the reason I bring that up is we're so reliant on GPS that when it goes down, it's not just location information. It's timing. Communication systems go down. Trading floors don't work properly, and having this information will give us insights into when we cannot rely upon it. And knowing that, I think, will give us an ability to overcome that hurdle.
So you have already mentioned the question that I'm going to ask, but let me let me not skip that question as well, because you said we are so much dependent that we are not ready with plan B, because if something went wrong, we would be like, oh my God, we don't have any plans to carry on with that. So how do the stakeholders, farmers, suppliers, regulators, as well as partners influence the adoption of digital agriculture technology?
Uh, I think about the legal frameworks about this as well. Ownership of farm data, which is something that been discussed for decades, and we still haven't made very far progress. And the reason I say that is they're talking to the attorneys. They describe data as an intangible. It is an economist. I'm going to compare from a legal and economic perspective. From a legal perspective, ownership has these rights and responsibilities around this bundle of things, and a few of the characteristics is the right to consume, and consume means destroy in this case. Destroying data isn't the same as destroying a bale of hay or a bushel of rice. You can't really use it up because it's electrons, right? And there's other things about excludability. Can you exclude somebody from it? You know, if you have a pencil, you can keep it away from other people. But data is not that way, especially once a copy has been made. Okay? That's the kind of legal perspective on it. And then the economic perspective is similar, but we ask a couple of questions. We ask, well, can more than one person make use of this and benefit from it? And the answer is yes. So if you think about it as a book, if you think about your favorite book, multiple people can read that book and enjoy it without diminishing the value to anyone else. Okay? That means that the word is non-rival. Another one goes back to excludability. Can you exclude others from it? And economists, this is their litmus test to decide if something is a private good. You know what a private good is? It's your pencil. You can keep others from using it. And then a public good. And a public good is like national defense. Everybody in the country equally enjoys the national defense, right? There's two things in the middle: a club good, and think of Netflix. Okay, multiple people can consume it, but there is a barrier for letting people in. Farm data fits more in the club good, the Netflix model, or maybe probably a public good, and that's not the message that people want to hear from me. They want me to say, no, that is yours, but that's not the way it is in reality, because it just doesn't nicely fit. And going back to your original question, the reason I bring that in is we don't have state and federal laws to govern this concept. Right now, or maybe last month in January 2026, Nebraska had a bill that went to the floor that would say that there is ownership of farm data, and that's fine. But in the absence of legislation, we revert back to contracts, and contracts are typically penned by larger corporations and given to individuals, farmers, and so forth, to either accept or not accept. And so there's not really negotiation power in that relationship. That, I think, is going to be the crux from the stakeholders' perspective. That's going to limit or guide this into the future.
So what are the, as you already mentioned everything on the same question, but I just wanted to dive into more deeper into that. So what are the financial related challenges that affect the decision to adopt the digital agriculture solution?
So, if you ask most economists, they're going to say, larger acreage farms had the advantage of being able to spread out the fixed cost of adoption, and all that's true. I'm going to take it a step further and mention non-monetary factors. Okay, so I mentioned human
I
capital.
just wanted to like ask one question. Okay, let me be like very like clear about that. For my knowledge, when I came here in United States, it's my maybe 1.5 year already I have stayed here, and I went to the farm, and there are lots of farm machineries involved. And then I asked them, doesn't cost more? Because farmer are there to pay. I know that they are very rich. I thought that, but they are in the depth as per as my knowledge, and they say that investment and financial are issue here too. So you
Hmm.
can just incorporate everything and tell me the answer.
Okay. Okay. So let me hit the non-monetary thing. I'll circle back when I'm thinking about that in the back of my head. Human capital is we talked about it earlier. You're going to school right now. I invested my time to be a data scientist of sorts. The opposite of that is quality of life. So, automated guidance, one of the things they immediately did was it made people's lives better. They weren't as cranky at the end of the day because they didn't have to drive straight. Their hands were free. If they have wireless connectivity, they can, trade stocks or sell grain or watch cat videos, Netflix, whatever they want to do. It increase the quality of life. Okay? Um, Farm finances are fascinating. And I've got a couple of ongoing projects that I'm just starting to work with some students on, and I'll mention that in a second. Um, but when it comes to farm profitability, we looked at this in Illinois when I was there 25 years ago, and in Kansas more recently. If you look at the top third most profitable farmers versus the bottom third most profitable farmers, and there are some differences. But typically, it's not necessarily always yield. It's not always how much nitrogen that they use. One of the biggest factors is how much money they spend on equipment, whether it's equipment payments or equipment repairs and maintenance. Okay, either end of that is really affects farm profitability. So yes, $1 million cotton picker. In Northeast Arkansas, where you are, it's there's only so many good days to get in and harvest, and a machine like that needs 2,200 acres to make it cash flow, and that's about as many acres as possible that it can cover, given its acres per hour and the number of days that cotton can be harvested. Okay? Farm finances. One of the things I'm looking at from FEMA, we have data on combine fires, hay equipment fires. Bureau of Labor Statistics, I have farm injuries and fatalities. And we're correlating those to changes in net farm incomes over for each state. And, sadly, there's correlations.
So finally, your favorite question. What concern around data ownership, security, trust, or regulatory uncertainty do you believe act as a barrier to the adoption of this technology?
I kind of mentioned it earlier when we're talking about data ownership from a legal and
Yes.
economic perspective. That phrase is a really bad phrase that we all use. Data ownership. It implies someone owns the data, and that's just a bad phrase coming out the gate because
You already mentioned that farmers' data need to be public data, right? So, like,
it
why
is
farmer
public data.
dis?
Yeah.
Yes, it is public data, but they don't agree to make it available publicly. So, what are the things that they think that they don't want to data to be public?
Well, they can control that, but they'll just need to not have it where anybody can get access to it. If they exclude it, they can maintain control. But once it's been shared, excludability has been greatly diminished because if I email you something, you email me, right, the Zoom link, okay? How many servers do you think that Zoom link is on between Jonesboro and Manhattan? It's a bunch, okay? It's out there, and there's no way of really pulling it back in. And the same way with farm data, and especially in places in the Midwest where farmland market is very fierce, landowners will get a copy of the data. Even before they ask for it, they'll get a copy just as being preemptive to keeping the landowner happy. Once that data's been shared with anybody, excludability has been greatly diminished. So from an economic perspective, data is a public good. because it's non-rival and excludability is not really a big thing. Let me put it this way. Um, if you look at generations at the table, right now we have maybe a handful of silent generation who were born before World War II, but baby boomers who were born after World War II up to mid 1960s, they control a lot of assets, and then that particular group they were young when yield monitors were commercialized in the 1990s. They were in their 30s. Okay, so they've seen a lot of things. And then you got Generation X. They were born mid 1960s up to 1980. They're getting older, but they're still very active. One of the younger generations who are on the farm right now is Generation Z, Generation Z, Zoomers, college age people. They have a very different way of looking at the world. They don't remember a time when you couldn't get access to internet from your pocket, from an iPhone or at least an iPad or something like that. And my generation, when I started college, I stood in line to fill out paperwork to get an email address. Today, if you're in college, they give you an email address and they expect you to use it. Right? So it's very different when it comes to digital across generations. And the reason I bring that up is trust. The people who've seen automated guidance become commercialized had to learn how to trust it in order to use it. A Gen Z probably never made that decision. They just automatically trusted it. They expected it to work. They expected it to work 24/7, 365 without any issues. And if it does, they're going to move on to the next thing. They don't have a tolerance for technology that doesn't work. Gen X, baby boomers, we put some effort into making things work. Back in the 90s, we never had a software package that worked. It was always like, this is the beta version. Here's a patch to the beta version. And then eventually they'll just come up with a new number for it and rebranding, and it never was a final product. But we were tolerant of this. I don't see the younger generation being as tolerant of beta versions. And that's why I tell the manufacturers when we develop things, we're not going to get a second or third chance with this next generation of farmers. We got to make it work now.
Yeah.
First try.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your insights. Your experience will contribute to our ongoing study, and the findings will be published in both article as well as podcast series. We truly appreciate your time.